Hello there, my dear friends. We're gonna be reviewing this video from Wally today. Let's go and react to this a little bit and see what my thoughts turn out to be. Which I'm sure I'll probably have more than I'm thinking.
Well, it's 3 in the morning and I'm sorry to report, but the verdict is in for the Jehovah's Witnesses versus Norway, something I've been covering on this channel extensively for the last 4 years or so, and we finally have the verdict in the Supreme Court. So let's talk about it real quick. Decisions to deny state subsidies and registration to Jehovah's Witnesses are invalid. The case concerns the validity of 5 decisions to refuse state subsidies and 1 decision to deregister Jehovah's Witnesses as a religious community, as well as the refusal of new registration. The state was of the opinion that the religious community's practice of social exclusion violates children's rights and the members' right to free withdrawal. So you have Section 6 of the Religious Communities Act and Article 9 of the European Convention of Human Rights. The Supreme Court explained the organization and teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses, including the practice of disfellowshipping and social exclusion of former members, and the legal framework under the Religious Communities Act and the freedom of religion under the ECHR. The court emphasized that the threshold for refusing state subsidies and registration is high, and that the provisions of Section 6 must be interpreted in light of, among other things, the religious community's autonomy under Article 9 of the European Court of Human Rights. With regard to children's rights, the Supreme Court unanimously found that the state had not adduced sufficient evidence that Jehovah's Witnesses in practice subject underage members to psychological violence or negative social control to such an extent that children's legally protected rights are violated. The court emphasized the internal guidelines for dealing with minors, that family ties are not broken, and that no actual extent of disfellowshipping of children had been documented.
Could not be more fictional and false. Could not be. The thing is that they could argue that they don't have the sufficient evidence. They absolutely do. Because we all do. Everyone does. The internet's fucking forever. We have so many, countless, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that have not only made their own channels and made their own content explaining their experiences with exactly that process, let alone, even current Jehovah's Witnesses, ironically, in their own major summer convention, and yearly talks, kinds of videos that they output. I mean, literally, we have one on my channel. This one right here, this one, forced to abandon his dad at 8. If you watch it, you can clearly tell he's still very heavily impacted and affected by that. He's quite literally, even as an adult now in his middle ages, exhibiting trauma related to that, because that's a very real thing that exists and that transpires and happens. So horse hockey, that's fucking bullshit. You literally have it from their own governing body produced videos. You have the evidence and the proof that they absolutely do this, because obviously you shouldn't only be looking at, oh, was this person a minor at the time, especially if they're say 12 and under at the time and they got disfellowshipped. You should be also looking at the other side of it, of adults who, were forced to disfellowship their own families and shun and outcast and permanently pretend they don't exist, their own family members, to the extent that it's literally children under 10 years of age, single-digit age children, that are forced to participate in the disfellowshipping and the avoidance of their own fucking parents, simply because of the fact that they might question the doctrine, or they may question something in it, or they may have their faith waver, or they might decide to say, fuck it, I'm leaving, or whatever the fuck else. It's absolutely inexcusable that this is a fucking thing. That they have the audacity to lie and to claim that there's not enough evidence, and they don't have it. if the courts and the lawyers and the prosecutors, everyone, were doing the correct level of due diligence, which is the fullest due diligence, they would have gone global, not just within Norway alone. They would have gone globally and looked like this on the internet of clear proof and documentation of it, to where, again, it's on jw.org themselves. They output it. So yes, they absolutely have all the evidence they need. They just clearly didn't do their due diligence and didn't care enough to actually fucking hunt it down and research it. And in fact, I shouldn't even be using the term hunt it down, because as we all know, that's horseshit. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. To the extent that literally they're actively forming, as I mentioned in multiple videos before, even over a year ago, that they are actively in the works of forming a specialized form of trauma therapy directly off of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and some ex-Mormons and some ex-Scientologists, but it's predominantly ex-Jehovah's Witnesses like ourselves, because we have so much of this trauma related to this shit. And a lot of it does come from the disfellowshipping and shunning practices. Because, especially as a child, what the fuck are you supposed to do with that? How are you supposed to reckon with that, or accept it and just pretend that somebody doesn't exist? Because it's the most one of the most unnatural things you can possibly do. You're literally asking somebody to do something that they are not built to functionally do, and you're trying to train this into them as if they need this, because otherwise they too must be disfellowshipped, because they too are poisoning their family's spirituality or something. It's aka being basically infested with Satan's demon's influence. It's so fucking stupid. It's so bullshit that they actually claim and have the audacity to, well, let's face it, outright lie and say they don't have the evidence. It's literally global evidence. It's everywhere. It's rapidly building. Absolutely fucking ridiculous.
That's pretty annoying. Furthermore, the Supreme Court considered whether the practice of social exclusion of former members violates the members' right to free withdrawal. The court found that Jehovah's Witnesses meet the requirement for free and unconditional resignation pursuant to Section 2 of the Religious Communities Act. The majority of 3 judges found that the practice of exclusion does not constitute undue pressure on the members in violation of Article 9 of the ECHR. Among other things, emphasis was placed on the fact that the practice is rooted in the religious community's teachings, is known to the members when they join, and does not involve direct pressure, coercion, or threats.
It literally does. Like, you would tell Wally's like, because he was trying to hold back so he could continue reading before he fucking retorts. Because, like, again, literally ask anyone who's left. 100%, I guarantee 100% of us will tell you that's complete bullshit. Everyone's gonna scoff. Everyone's gonna be disgusted that they ever claim such a thing. They're gonna be like, what in the fuck are you talking about? Do you need some Zyprexa? Because clearly you're in a psychosis of some sort of schizophrenic level, because you're not operating in reality if you actually deem it this way. That's how fucking wild that is to claim that, because it's everywhere. We're everywhere. It's just ridiculous.
Again, pretty annoying. The practice of exclusion does not apply to family members in the same household. Family ties are not broken for family members outside of the household. Family ties are not broken for family members outside the household. That is the biggest load of malarkey I've ever heard. The majority subsequently found that the conditions for refusing state subsidies and registration pursuant to Section 6 of the Religious Communities Act were not met. The decision on refusal of grants and deregistration could therefore not be upheld. 2 judges dissented on the questions of whether Jehovah's Witnesses expose their members to undue pressure to resign, thereby violating the members' right to free resignation. The minority placed particular emphasis on the fact that exclusion can lead to lost contact with family members, especially for minors. It also emphasized that the exclusion is the result of a rule-based order and is intended to be tangible consequence for the person who resigns. The minority therefore believed that the conditions for refusing state subsidies and registration pursuant to Section 6 of the Religious Communities Act were met. The minority further concluded that the decision to refuse registration was an interference with the freedom of religion pursuant to Article 9 of the ECHR. but that the interference was justified. The minority was of the opinion that the decisions were not contrary to the protection against discrimination under Article 14 of the ECHR and the protection of the right to property under Article 1. The judgment clarifies the threshold for refusing state subsidies and resignation of religious communities and how the rules should be assessed in relation to religious freedom under the ECHR. The judgment, we can see here, the appeal is rejected, and they find that the original claim for state subsidies that was denied, that was deemed invalid. And so the Supreme Court rules that this Ministry of Children and Families pays Jehovah's Witnesses a little over 2 million kroners as well. So the Jehovah's Witnesses won in the Supreme Court.
I'm sorry, does that mean that they're profiting off of this for over $2 million in Norwegian money because what? Is it considered to be damages and defamation, and therefore they must pay them? Or is like the structure over there just simply like, if somebody wins a case that is brought against them, especially by the nation's courts, they're automatically owed compensation, basically, to cover all their legal expenses, no matter how much money, by the way, they may have in the fucking bank? Which, being a massive real estate firm, J-dubs have a ton of. Even so, this is... everything about this is wrong. You also have to remember that the Jehovah's Witnesses have been actively, consistently using now for years the same exact legal firms and lawyers that both the Mormons and also that, of course, the Catholics have been consistently using to keep statute of limitations laws in various different countries, whatever their equivalents are, basically as they are, which is very antiquated, very ancient, and very out of date, and that basically fucks over the victims of their crimes, or the members' crimes.
Like they did in the appellate court as well. And I suppose my reaction to this is very similar to what it was before, and that this is a legal victory, but not a moral victory, which is an important thing, I suppose, to understand. This doesn't represent, the country of Norway patting Jehovah's Witnesses on the back and saying, "Oh, good on you, lads. I'm real sorry that those crazy, corrupt people in the Ministry of Children and Families were giving you the shakedown. We're really on your side." It's not that. The world is not so black and white. Jehovah's Witnesses have this weird thing where they just see everything as right and wrong. There's no nuance to it, and there's no gray area to anything. So obviously they're going to be wiggling their fingers in the air and saying that, this is a pure victory, but it's just simply not, because there's a difference between the state saying, well, we have a really high bar set for denying state subsidies and for you to not be able to register a religion. And you got really, 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 really close to that very, very high bar that we set, but you didn't quite go over it. This document's pretty big, and I'll go over it more tomorrow when it's not 3 a.m. and I'm a little more fresh. But from the looks of it, there were 3 judges that voted that it was invalid, and 2 that said no, they should uphold it. So it was very close. 3-2. It was an actual nail biter, to be completely honest with you. So it really could have gone either way. But I think, again, it's good to understand that this is just them saying, yes, you do bad things. Yes, you do shun people. Yes, this does demonstrate a measure of coercion. But is it enough coercion? Is it enough threats? Have you really violated the law sufficiently to warrant not being able to be registered as a religion and not receive state subsidies? And now we have the answer as to what the court of Norway thinks about that.
Well, yeah, literally a victim Olympics is basically what it forces it to turn into. They're basically turning into a straight up victim Olympics, because that's all that can actually do, having a limitation or a threshold on how coercive is it, how manipulative is it, how abusive is it, You know, what's the level of traumatic damage it causes a family? You know, because there's certain amounts that are totally acceptable and fine. That's okay. You still get, you know, favoritism. However, if you pass this certain set of thresholds and check these certain boxes, then we might have to tell you to fuck off. It's fucked up because it literally forces people to now have to not only relive their traumas just to fucking make a case against, in this case, a mega group like this, but also it forces you to basically argue and aggressively defend the fact that you were abused and that your abuse and trauma does count enough. The manipulation does count, that you experienced does count enough to be able to be considered a, you know, a high enough threshold that it passes this boundary, this barrier of limitations, the sound bar. If it only fills up to here, not good enough. If it fills up halfway, still not good enough. You got to get up here, like 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up this bar. You got to fill it all up there. But then you also have to pass this point in order for us to consider it enough abuse and trauma that you have, and manipulation that you've experienced. That's required by our laws. Sorry, that's just the way it works. You haven't been experiencing enough trauma and abuse and manipulation from this group, or your family members, your fucking parents, or your parent that you may have been stuck with. You haven't experienced enough of that.
This is a positive. Like, no, at least for me, like how I see it, I can't imagine looking at this as being a net negative, because the exposure that this has for Jehovah's Witnesses in Europe in general was massive. A lot of people were tuning in. A lot of people were following this. Whenever I talked about it on the channel, all of those videos, you know, were pretty popular. Even people that weren't Jehovah's Witnesses would comment and talk about it. So I think this is a very important thing that happened, and it's not a net negative, because that negative exposure is so important. It's so important to break that mold of, you know, ordinary, regular people just wandering around the city thinking that Jehovah's Witnesses are weird but not dangerous or bad. When you get this level of negative publicity, you start seeing them as weird and low-key kind of dangerous and bad. So I think that is going to be, it's going to have long-term effects, and to a certain extent, at least how I think about things, it already has had some effects on Jehovah's Witnesses. These are real world consequences, at least how I'm seeing it, for what happened in Norway. And you have to remember that when they do make these changes, when these negative news reports do come out, Jehovah's Witnesses are seeing these. We don't really know how many people that just by the proceedings that happen actually woke up from this. So again, I don't think you can stress it enough. Like, this isn't, yes, it's a loss. You know, you would love to see it. Them get, you know, deregistered as a religion, not be able to get any of their money. Not that I really think Watchtower needs it all that much. Just not at all. Maybe it's a hot take, but like, it's still a net positive. And all of the people that put in so much hard work and, you know, really dedicated a significant portion of their life to fighting for this should be so proud. They should really hold their heads up so high. And we should be there also to support them and tell them, hey, you need to hold your head up high, because this is a very good thing that happened. Exposure in a negative way is a pretty positive thing in the end.
This is harder for me to accept personally, for me, because it is very personal, because I didn't just experience this kind of bullshit with, obviously, Jehovah's Witnesses, or my childhood psychiatrist. I literally directly experienced it my whole time growing up with my dad. So, like, I literally had endless sociopathy and endless fucking manipulation going on at all fucking times. Completely totalitarian, dictatorial kind of bullshit that happens with that. You know, and the constant nonstop invalidation, and, you know, nothing ever good enough, and you're always going to be this horrible piece of shit, you know, type of thing. I've experienced that my whole fucking life, along with all the gaslighting and all the other fucking excuse making to try to defend and say, well, it's not as bad as you think it is. It's not as bad as you say it is. It's not actually being that evil. It's not that abusive. It's not that manipulative. Like, I've experienced worse. Again, the whole victim Olympics thing, the competition it turns into, because this weird threshold requirement that exists, including kind of colloquially and just in general in people's heads, since I guess societally would be the correct term there, because it's not a word. It's just, that really affects me. Like, for a while there, especially at a certain point there, when I was like way down here, it's because literally all of this was, I was recognized, I was just kind of feeling through it, and I'm like internally everything. That's why I was taking deep breaths and everything. It's like trying not to just like almost go and just be like, fuck, because like what are you supposed to do with all that? What are you supposed to do with that? You're just really just supposed to you're expected to just accept it and be like, no, it's as Wally says, a net positive. It's fucking not. Like, if you haven't been properly through that shit, especially when they excuse it away like that and saying it's not sufficient amount of, basically they should have just simply said outright what they meant, which is it's not sufficient levels and amounts, severity of manipulation. It's not sufficient severity to us of abuses, and thus it's not sufficient severity of the trauma experienced. Yes, you're traumatized. Yes, you've been manipulated. Yes, you've been fucking, abused. But not enough. Not enough. Wherever we don't care. Continue to suffer. Like, that's, if they just fucking said that outright, I would actually genuinely be calmer, and I'd be more able to accept it, because at least they're being bluntly honest about it. Being like, yeah, nah, you can fuck yourself. We don't actually give a fuck. Your abuse doesn't matter, because it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to us. Whatever the fuck the criteria is, and that threshold that has to be met and surpassed is to these idiots, I don't fucking know. Because the only people who know are those people. And I'd wager that it's actually more personal at that point, thresholds that they're expecting to be surpassed, than it is actually a legal precedent set. In this case, in Norway. I guarantee there's no actual legal text anywhere that says that, that literally outlines clear and concisely the things that must happen, and the symptomology and the signs and the diagnoses that must follow abuse and manipulation, and trauma, and literally making it into a fucking hierarchy, a tier, and being like, it must pass the third tier of 5 tiers in order to, validate that it was enough trauma, manipulation, and abuse that people or a person or a family has endured through another person, another family member, a friend, a coworker, a psychiatrist, a doctor, or whatever else, or in this case, a religious group, a cult. Because that's the reality of what this reveals, right? This is what it is. That's why it's so fucking personal to me. Because that's what they're saying. They're saying your abuse wasn't enough. Your trauma isn't good enough. Your fucking manipulation that you experienced wasn't good enough. It's not enough. You're not as traumatized, and you're not as fucking abused, and you're not as fucking manipulated as you say you were. Not enough. That's child's play, what you experienced. So you can fuck off. Go away. That's literally the exact equivalent of what the fuck they're doing with this. That's highly offensive, especially to people like myself who have fucking experienced this at multiple levels on multiple fronts. Especially as a fucking minor. That I had to grow up through it every fucking day of my life. It is highly personal at that point. Because people act like it's some complex, complicated thing, abuse and manipulation. It's fucking not. It's not at all. And actually, it's one of the most hyper-simplistic things in existence, is how, throughout human history, people and groups manipulate and abuse and traumatize. It is so stupid. I can never emphasize enough how just, there's no human words that exist to express how incredibly, wildly, stupidly, insanely, incomprehensibly fucking easy it is to manipulate somebody. Let alone to therefore traumatize and abuse somebody. And a human mind, a human brain. It really fucking is. Look throughout all of our history, globally. I always go back to Nazi Germany because it's the most current modern historic event and sequence of events, really, over a course of about 20 years that had transpired to get to that point. It took, that's it, 20 fucking years to get to a point where nobody really had that prejudice there. Nobody had any of those weird beliefs that, you know, Jewish people or Jehovah's Witnesses or Polish people randomly, because Poles, I guess, apparently are, I don't know. But anyway, you know, like they're the most heinous things that ever could exist. They're equivalent to poisoning spirituality for Jehovah's Witnesses is they are a threat to your life. It only took them 20 years to convince millions upon millions of people, their own people, that this was a factual reality and it was true. And then millions more around Europe and the world into pretending that they believed it just for their own stupid, arrogant self-preservation. Because they'd rather preserve their own life than they would try to fight back and stand morally and ethically against the fucking bullshit lies that were being spewed, the bigotry that's being spewed against these groups of people. They were themselves manipulated. Tens of millions more. Maybe even hundreds of millions more. It's utterly insane how easy it is to manipulate a person. Every last one of those people were abused in some way because they were manipulated. But again, let's actually use that as an example. What in the flying fuck is the threshold there? Is that the top of the hierarchy of your stupid little thresholds that say you must reach this much abuse and this much manipulation and have this much trauma in order to actually, you know, have a case here that we're going to actually hear and say, you know what, you're right. We shouldn't give this religious organization, you know, the money and allow them to continue to be considered a religious organization, be registered as such, because that is abusive. That is abusive enough. That is manipulative enough. That is coercive enough. Like, or is that not enough? Do you have to literally go through the Holocaust as a victim in order to have a chance to say that's enough? Is that the threshold? Where's the threshold? Where's your fucking lines? Do you see what I'm fucking saying? And you understand why this is so personal to me and why it pisses me off so much? It's infuriating to me for that reason, because the sheer amount of people who just through the Jehovah's Witnesses alone, and therefore technically their families, have had to go through literal sociopathy, if not borderline psychopathy, especially growing up and being born and raised and growing up in it, is unbelievable. There's probably over 10 million people in this world right now that have either gone through it or continuing to go through it. In fact, I know there's tens of millions that have experienced this because they've been around long enough now as an organization that there's that many people that have experienced being victims of this and realizing this is fucked up, you know? There's so many people, even just now, there's millions of people that have left that are just traumatized. And they still can't associate with their family members. Again, the governing body literally has and promotes these fucking people, especially post, you know, disfellowshipping changes, their own members who were born and raised in it, who are still clearly traumatized and very emotionally impacted by the fact that at 8 years old, or even younger, they've had to fucking completely be forced against their will to abandon, shun, and even slander, let alone pretend they do not exist, their own parents, or grandparents, or siblings, because how dare you not believe and never question the doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses? How dare you? You're trying to kill us all in Armageddon. Because how dare you use that big, beautiful brain that Jehovah would have given you? The brain is not meant to, your big, beautiful brain in mind is never meant to be used. It's only meant to listen to the things that you're told to listen to and thus believe. And you're only allowed to echo those things and think about those things. Anything else, that's worldly. That's Satan and his demons trying to influence you. That's sinful. You're poisoning the spirituality. Stop that. You stop that right now. How dare you? Do you want to be disfellowshipped? Do you want to fucking lose your parent? Do you want to lose yourself in your family? Do you want to be shunned in this household by us, by all your family, and you have to grow up alone and ostracized? Do you really want that? Or do you want Jehovah's love and kindness and to be resurrected on paradise earth in perfect health and condition at the perfect age and see all your family you never met before again? It's so stupid. Like, at the end of the day, it's just, that's what the reality is. It's therefore insulting and very personal to me. And it's a big problem that they fucking went and they lied. And they said, no, not enough. You have to be and this is not an insult, this is a statement of fact. You have to be a very, very morally and ethically corrupt and a very fucked up piece of shit to make that argument and literally outright be willing to say such a thing and believe it and say, you haven't been abused enough. You haven't been manipulated enough. You're not traumatized enough to win this case. Your abusers, however, therefore, are going to win. And they're going to be paid for it in the millions. Because you've been slanderous towards them. And you made them waste their time and their money in our courts, which is expensive. That's, in translation, what Norway's courts just did. So yeah, it is a net negative, my friend. It is. We can agree to disagree on that as much as you want to. But yes, Wally is wrong to say it's a net it is not. It is absolutely not. That's accepting scraps. It's not even really scraps. It's barely accepting a quarter of a remaining crumb that you have to fight with an ant to get a hold of. That's what you've been given in the positives, is realistically what it is. Because it's just the global attention. Cool. You have to acknowledge, though, that, especially modern day, people's attention spans are basically non-existent. So, what does that mean? Oh, that's right. Just observe, and you'll find out that nobody fucking cares about something they cared so much about when something else crops up. And they even completely forget about it. And then they put that into a hierarchical system and make it competitive as well with the other things and saying, well, that's not as important or that's not as impactful as this is. Therefore, that not relevant anymore. This is. And is that really the hill you're willing to die on, to be stuck on that stupid thing when it really doesn't actually, it's not that important compared to this thing that's also controversial or also this big issue? How dare you? Insert ever pejorative here. That's the world we live in today. It really is. So, no, it's not a positive. It's a net negative. It absolutely is. For that reason as well. I would argue that reason alone is enough to counter Wally's point of trying to say that's what makes it a net positive, is actually what makes it a net negative. Because everyone's going to forget. And the next big thing is going to come along, and they're going to get distracted by that, and then they're going to care so passionately about that for a few days or a few hours to a few months, until the next thing comes along, and then the same routine is just, it's a cycle. It just repeat, because that's what a cycle is. It's a loop. It just loops. And so you just reset. That's the world we genuinely live in. That's how humans function now. So, no, not the case. Yeah, there's going to be a few scragglers out there. In the grand scheme, there might be a few thousand people around the world that are still going to make noise about it and talk about it and think about it and discuss it and shed more light on it, analyze it. That doesn't matter. Anyway, thank you so much for, yeah, I guess watching and listening. And yeah, let me know your own thoughts genuinely in the comments below. I'd like, in your experiences, because I'd like to see genuinely kind of almost like the natural split that's probably going to be in there between people who would agree with Wally and say, no, it is still a net positive, even after everything I've said and expressed, versus those who are going to be obviously more on this side of the fence and saying, like, no, we have experienced enough that that was sufficient, and that attention alone is not going to ever be enough to make it a positive. This is still a negative. They told us to basically go fuck ourselves, is what they told us just then. In translation, that's really what they said. And that's probably one of the most insulting results you can ever have. Also, I forgot. I don't think I remembered to continue my thought. I think I cut myself off. But right here got really tense at one point because that's my natural trauma response initially, especially when it gets more defensive or like angry and upset, because I guess the right term would be hurt and thus agitated and frustrated, because that's something that came about once I had to go through the trauma that I did with my dad, being that same kind of manipulative and abusive way. So I haven't experienced that genuinely in years. That's how dead on line this was with the shit that I had to experience with my dad and everything else. Which again, this shit is exactly what I'm going to fucking therapy for and have now for over 2 years. And I probably will for the rest of my life. It's that impactful. Like, and if that's true for me, it's not gonna, that means that there's God knows how many other people out there that's gonna be true for as well. It's not us just simply being drama queens or melodramatic or soap opera, idiots that are exaggerating. It's genuinely how we've been impacted. And thus to be lied to and told to our face that we are invalid again, this time by a fucking court, because we didn't experience enough abuse or manipulation or trauma, apparently, to whatever the fuck their criteria is that they feel needs to be met to be considered to be enough. You're gonna feel some type of way. I digress.